All right, so it's 5:30, so we will call this workshop to order. Up first, we will just go right into the Pledge of Allegiance.
All right, everybody, please stand and put your hand over your heart and join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Right. Well, I appreciate everyone being here today for the joint workshop. Being that we only have one topic, I am assuming this is the Zinguzi Festival, so I will turn it over to you, sir.
Mayor, City Council members, and LPA members, good evening. Welcome to this kind of rare gathering, both of the City Council and the LPA. The manager, City Attorney, my staff and I, we all thought that would be a good idea, given the matter at hand, that we have this gathering so that we're all on the same page as far as the issues involved and also the guiding policies that will follow this discussion. However, before we do that, let me take this opportunity to provide you an overall context and also a picture of the entire effort to date. And I'm saying this because some of you were not here as members of the City Council or members of the LPA when this whole entire effort started. So just as a standard working procedure, in order for any community to effectively guide its land use and development issues, it must, and I repeat, it must establish 4 elements. And these elements are a comprehensive plan, which contains the policies of the community and its vision, a future land use map, a map that guides, in a broad sense, what development should go where, a zoning map showing the types and specific uses that are designed to be allowed in the city. And finally, a land development code that outlines the specific regulations and requirements for each development. Now, furthermore, not only should a community have these elements all consistent with each other, they must also be able to guide all development such that there's order and also there's consistency in what is developed. Now, having these elements all in concert prevents, and I think our city attorney will attest to this, it prevents unnecessary lawsuits because we would have been able to establish a nexus or a connection between our policies and our requirements that people follow. In addition, that connection between these elements is so important in creating a predictable environment for developers and the public in general. Now, it is important to note that since the city's founding, the city has not had at a time when all these 4 elements are consistent with each other. In a nutshell, that is why this effort is so important, and that is why we're here tonight to advance the need to establish consistency among these elements. To date, our effort has accomplished the following. We've updated the city's comprehensive plan. We've made the comprehensive plan consistent with the future land use map. We've cleaned up our zoning map such that it is consistent with the future land use map. And now, we're in the final stages of this entire effort, the process of rewriting the land development code such that it is consistent with the policies in the comprehensive plan. Those are the policies that it is supposed to implement. that is where we are to date, and we're almost there. Unless you have any questions, I'll turn over to our principal planner to go over the details of this evening. Steve?
Thank you, sir. Mayor, council, members of the LPA. Appreciate you all coming out tonight to discuss these topics that we have in store for you, because this will really help staff in furthering the development of the draft of the LDC, but specifically with Article 4. So real quick, I'm going to rehash the agenda. We just did the director's comments. I'm going to do a brief overview of where we are now. Then we'll get into the policy discussions per the staff report. We'll discuss next steps. And then we'll also discuss a brief overview of what's coming after Article 4. And then we'll get into any questions if there are any, right? So with that, let's just get right to the policy discussions. Or I'm sorry, where we are. So to date, we have Article 1, 2, 3, and 4 have all been released for public review. They're all posted to the LDC Rewrite webpage within the city's website. Articles 1, 2, and 3 have been reviewed by the LPA, and they have all three of those been recommended approval or recommended to City Council for approval. And so now currently Article 4 is under that final draft review. And so before we bring Article 4 to the LPA, these are the policies that staff would like to get further guidance on to develop that final draft. So the 7 policy discussions we're going to cover tonight: parking, open space, residential landscape, tattoo versus permanent makeup, mobile vending, primary building separation, and maximum walking distances for off-site parking. So let's get right into parking. There are 3 specific topics within this one policy that we need to discuss. So we'll just jump right into the outdoor seating. So currently within the LDC, there is no requirement for parking when it comes to outdoor seating for any use. We recently had a development order and a proposed development come through that specifically had nothing but outdoor seating. And that was a major point of contention, was the amount of parking that was required per that development. The amount of parking that was required only applied to the structure that housed the kitchen and any office space. And so the parking was very minimal. However, they did provide quite a bit of outdoor seating. So they were able to fit essentially a 2,000 square foot restaurant, but not have to park to it. And that's because they only provided outdoor seating. So there's obviously an issue within the city when it comes to parking, not just within the Harbor District, but everywhere. And so staff is requesting guidance onto whether or not to include outdoor seating as, or require parking for outdoor seating to the use that it is supporting. And that's where we are right now.
And I will just bring it up for everyone who's joining us today. While we are separated, unfortunately, this is all open workshop. We're all on the same level here. So, we're just going to round robin this, and please at any point feel free to chime in. And does anyone want to start that? My first comment would be, because of that example that we had, I think outdoor and indoor seating should be treated the same. If it's a pedestrian or if it's a client coming in, I think it doesn't really matter where they seat. I think that allows for open interpretation to maximize square footage and reduce for parking. So for me, it's outdoor, indoor, doesn't matter. And if anyone else wants to jump in. Oh.
I was just going to ask, are we allowed to know where that property that was being built or put together for a restaurant with just outdoor seating, is that in, are we allowed to discuss where it is?
I'm getting the nod from Kim over there that
You can give the general description. We won't get into the whole application since it's quasi-judicial, but you can tell her the location.
Yeah, so it was the recent restaurant that came through at Terracotta and
Got
Scenic
it.
98.
I got it. That's right. Thank you.
All right, Councilman Destin.
Working?
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, just a little historical perspective. The reason we didn't count outdoor seating was twofold. The vision for the city at the time we last visited this subject was festive market, outdoor marketplace. The other thing was we had plans to have more than enough parking for the city of Destin. Parking garages, outdoor parking, et cetera. So that's why at the time we didn't require that outdoor seating was done in conjunction with parking. Now the problem as I see it to go forward and turn it completely around is if we're going to do that, then Festive Outdoor Marketplace won't be outdoor because there's no more parking at the moment, you know, until we build those garages, if we build those garages. And so we have just squashed a significant part of our vision. Of course, the other reason is it will completely shut down a lot of any new seating in the existing businesses. Of course, you know, I think when this issue came up, we were using parking to control growth, and we said if you didn't have the parking, you didn't build it. And then we moved to off-site parking, and then we moved to not requiring parking for outdoor seating. So while it seems like a simple solution would be just go back to those, without a whole lot of additional parking, you're going to freeze everything where it is. So I'm not sure that I'm in favor of that. Maybe a compromise between the two where you have to have a 30%, 40% more parking for your outdoor seating might be a way to transition into it. But to just completely turn it around is going to have some pretty serious impacts.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Is there a, you know, I would agree with that totally. You know, and that was where my mind was when we were discussing the property. The subject property was there's a whole lot of other businesses who get to, you know, conduct business with outdoor seating. It didn't seem like it would be right to deny them that ability. But I think, is there a way, I mean, is there a way to grandfather in the people who are already doing this? You know, because I know that if we go to requiring parking for all the outdoor seating that currently exists, you know, we ain't got enough room in here for all the people that are going to be here. You know what I mean? So
if we change the code to add that requirement, the existing businesses that don't have parking for their outdoor seating would be legal non-conforming. So they would be allowed to stay unless they tried to make changes and expand, basically. So then if they tried to expand, they'd have to meet the code.
So that would ultimately be giving them that grandfather opportunity to what they currently have, they can manage, but they can't change it up any to increase the outdoor seating, basically. They would have to stay as the course.
Yeah, the code calls it legal non-conforming use, so that's the technically accurate term, but casually you could call it grandfathering, I suppose.
and
I would say we'll have to take Festive Outdoor Marketplace out of our vision. You won't be able to put things outdoor.
is there a, and being that this is a workshop and we're just discussing this, how does it benefit the city? Does it benefit the business owners to say, you know, if you cease to do business, you can't sell that right to legal non-conforming use? Did I get that right? Yeah. So just a thought.
Only the way it works, Kim can correct me, but when you sell a business, as long as you continue the business a certain amount of time, then the non-conforming legal use continues with you. If you cease to use it for a certain amount of time, it goes away.
That's right. Yeah, the development approvals run with the land, not the ownership.
Anyone from LPA? Any comments?
I guess I'm just curious to the situation where people are providing off-site parking to accommodate their outdoor seating. Does that come into play here at all?
It would be
I mean, if you don't have enough on the property, but then you can provide it somewhere else,
Like Beauchamps.
like Beauchamps. I prefer not to use that name, but as an example, that's okay. I mean, does that fall into a percentage of, I mean, I don't get into the logistics of any, this is all new to me. So I guess my question is if you require one parking spot or whatever the formula is, if they don't have enough on the property, do you then say, okay, well, if you don't have it there, but if you make accommodations across the street or buy another piece of property or lease it or whatever, does that fall into this category, this new category?
So currently it wouldn't, because obviously outdoor seating isn't counted, right? But if we go some route where there's a formula applied, you're required 50 parking spaces, and we need 30 now, or you got to add 30% of your required to that. That's 15 spaces. So now you need 65 spaces. The off-site parking, if you have 20 on site, you'd need to provide the 45 elsewhere, right? So yes, it would be applied to where you are providing your off-site parking.
I just want to make sure that we're not looking to cut those people's ability to do that off. I mean, the livery vessels are another example of they don't have enough parking, so they're building parking spots up on Mountain Drive. Those people are buying properties and buying them, and then they're shuttling them down. I just want to make sure that the restaurants that we're talking about are afforded that same ability.
It would be applied equally across all uses, because parking, there's a use, and then that use requires a certain amount of parking, and then there are off-site parking regulations that are included in this draft Article 4 that would apply to certain situations in certain zoning districts.
Because I believe that in the Harbor District, we're always going to have more seats, outside seating, than we'll ever have parking, as long as we're on the south side of Highway 98. I just want to make sure that everyone, we're all in agreement that everyone gets treated equally the same as like the livery vessels. That's all. I just don't want this to change that ability.
I mean, for me, I think the opportunity there is if we're trying to build a parking garage or show the demand and the need for a parking garage, to have some kind of equation, whether it's monetarily or however it best makes it a win-win, but to allow people to put parking spaces onto hopefully a future parking deck. Is there a way to allow people to offset, and we can specify it to food and services, but to have food and service industry allowed to offset onto like school, onto city parking? Is there a way that we can leverage the need for parking into this future parking deck?
The broad answer is yes. And I think we have a policy currently right now in the comp plan that talks about that the community should provide community parking. And so that's something we have not really exercised that much. So that's something to consider. The other thing to consider too is we now have planning areas where we have looked at the types of development that's going in these planning areas. That's something we need to take a look at, where the pressures are for parking, and then plan accordingly which areas should have the ability to do certain things.
Yeah, because I mean, to the vision, yeah, go please.
Yeah, and of course, the best concept of fixing this is to do what we originally planned, which was to provide the parking. Yeah. However, we have to also think of, are we going to provide that parking for hotels, restaurants?
Food and service.
Food and beverage?
Food and service.
Or is it also extended to building condos or hotels?
I'm assuming we'd lose your vote if we went that way, so food and service.
Yeah, and so when we talk about that concept, we need to remember that it would be particularly to food and beverage and not to development of residential or.
I agree. Yeah,
and
that creates the festive
course,
marketplace.
Just doing the garages that we promised we would do was the reason we didn't require the parking for the outside. So this is kind of a conundrum that we've hung ourselves on.
Teresa.
I wanted to also, where is the standalone parking allowed? I mean, is that put anywhere, are we allowed to have just a standalone parking per business, per establishment? I mean,
So currently in the code, there's 3 zoning districts that allow standalone parking. In the North Harbor mixed-use district, it's permitted. In the institutional zoning district, it's permitted, and then town center mixed use, it is conditional. And then to further the point about the buyout or buy-in, we do have a code in Article 8 where it's called parking in lieu fees or in lieu parking fees, but it talks about a buyout program. And I think I just briefly glanced over it. You can do a minimum of 30, a maximum of 50. And there is a cost to each space that you buy out from. And that's you're buying a space in a public parking space. But to your point, Mr. Dustin, there is no limit on what use can use that. And so anyone that's in this area within the walking distance, and that's another policy that we'll discuss later tonight, could utilize that use. But if we want to limit the use, then...
Exactly why I mentioned it, because I understood.
Oh,
that
I'm sorry.
it was.
Let me clarify that. So residential uses cannot use it.
But is it allowed in other areas besides just those?
So there's off-site parking districts, and I believe it's specific to the Harbor District. And then I believe there's a location in Crystal Beach, but it is way more restrictive in the Crystal Beach area.
So would that be something that council could make? I mean, tell me legally.
So yes, that's why we're here, for you all to decide what your policies are. So if you want to allow standalone parking in more districts or less districts, that's up to you.
And the definition of residential is a prohibition. Tell me what residential, short-term, long-term, single-family.
We can look that up and get right back to you.
Okay, because that's important also.
Just one moment.
Yeah, because I know for me, at least a real world problem now is they're trying to have open green space and we're demanding parking, and those are basically contradicting values that we're trying to require people to build on. So, I mean, my grand vision of the harbor would be probably a little bit more density, a little less parking on the south side, and offset it to the north and really have a parking garage and mixed use, medium to high density commercial on the harbor. So that's kind of where I lie on how we get there is in the details, but I hope we can get more commercial density and reduce the requirement of parking on the south side of 98 in the Harbor District. So that's just kind of my grand vision of it all.
Well, in that case, we shouldn't require parking for the outdoor seats at all.
I'm just trying to make sure we have demand on the parking garage.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying though, if we want to reduce parking, we don't do that by requiring more parking.
I mean, and that's something where, if that's the way to get there, I'm fine with it. I think less parking on the south side's a better thing for the commerce.
Mayor, may I?
Please.
So he's talking about an exchange of 30 to 50 spaces in lieu of. Ooh, what about an impact fee to help build the parking garages? Do we have an impact fee to help build the garages from the South Side Harbor District that don't have do you follow where I'm going?
There's no specific impact fee. Did you want to add something, sir?
Yeah, I think he's going the right direction. There is no impact fee specific for, but for every development that comes in, you pay.
Specific to helping build the parking garage?
No, there isn't one specific to, unless you do what's said in that policy section there.
So you were talking to Daniel, and I was basically speaking to the 30 to 50 in lieu of spaces. Right. So my question was just like, if it's 30 to 50 in lieu of, why are we not doing an impact fee by these?
So there's a fee in here, and it's, how much is the fee? It's pretty pricey. Isn't it like 20 grand per space? Or 2,000 per space? Yeah, it's hefty.
So my point being is it needs to be hefty. And the reason it needs to be hefty is because if you're in another resort town, and I'll speak to Aspen, Colorado, because that's what I'm most familiar with, you can buy a parking spot for $500,000 just to park your car to go to work 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. Mm-hmm. So parking spaces aren't cheap. They shouldn't be cheap. I mean, if you can't provide it on your property or have other accommodations, and you have to, this is just my opinion. It doesn't mean that it means anything.
We're at the workshop.
But they should be expensive. If you can't provide them on your property or off-site, and that is your only option, then you should have to be able to provide money to help build the public parking areas. It's just my opinion. Doesn't mean anything, but I'm just putting in my,
Yeah, my 2 cents to that would just be how much it would cost them to do what they're doing now, buy the land, not really have any highest and best use for it, but just a parking deck or parking garage, I'm sorry, parking spaces. So what is it costing them now to buy land north of Mountain and do it, and versus what we could charge them? Because I would prefer that the land on Mountain Drive be mixed use and like economically driving and not a parking, off-site parking lot when we're trying to do the same with the public land.
Yeah. So clarify a few of my comments. I wasn't wrong, but I wasn't fully correct. So the in lieu fee that I spoke of earlier is actually set by council. Okay. The Crystal Beach Resort area where you can buy in, it's 20 grand per 10 spaces or fraction thereof. So about 2 grand per space. Okay. And then as far as the residential uses, it's specific to residential uses. So that would be single family, townhome, duplex, short-term, long-term rental. All right. We'd appreciate that clarity.
All right, anything else on this topic? We'll move on right along. Go ahead.
Thanks. Three admin points. Can we start with the committee first? Because, you know, when the council says this is, everybody just clenches up down here. It seems like it's like, okay, well, I'd like to get their ideas in a workshop, which I know they're a little bit reticent, well, except for Marcy, and we all know Marcy, and we love her, so. The other admin, when we do a workshop, can we do a workshop format as opposed to this format? And I would just ask Lance or Lewis not to schedule this, not to schedule anything, any city thing on Yom Kippur. I'm not Jewish, but this is the most holy day of their calendar. This would be like us having a workshop on Easter for me, a Catholic, and we would never do that. So those are my 3 admin points. Just to put a little context with what Mr. Destin said, yeah, when we changed it before, we were going multimodal, and everybody was going to be walking or riding a bicycle or riding a bus, and we didn't need all these parking spots because we were going to be a multimodal community, and we're not, and we probably never will be. You know, we'll have people, we'll be more bike friendly, but we're not going to have groups of 20 bicycling down to the harbor or bicycling over, you know, from the harbor to Crystal Beach. So that's why we didn't have that parking requirement in the festival. One of the main reasons we didn't have that. And then we got into the mixed use, and we started playing games with, well, the livery vessels, you know, all their clients, or the fishing fleet, all their clients come in the morning and they're gone by noon or they're gone by 4, and then the restaurants really don't open up till 4. So, you know, they can share that parking space and we'll just count it for both of them. No, because the restaurants now serve lunch. You know, we're not the same community that we were back then. We're not even the same community we thought we would be back then now. So we just need to address, and so I say that to say, I'm probably between the two of you. I agree with you. At some point, you got to man up, woman up, and say, if you're putting in 100 seats, you got to have this much parking. We don't care if they're on a deck. We don't care if they're covered, enclosed, air conditioned, whatever. But to do that and have a bunch of legal non-conforming uses, I'm not sure that is the solution either, but we ought to have a fixed time so everybody knows that we're going to do this 50% for 5 years. And then after that, it goes to 100% unless the council at that time votes to remove whatever the parking requirement is. So that's just the things that I wanted to say on the parking. And I will make one more point. I know we're mainly fixated on the harbor, but this applies to Crystal Beach. It was up in our face, you know, a couple of meetings ago. This applies to the properties on the south side of the harbor. okay? Over there by where Chatham's Place is and the other restaurants over there. This applies to more than just the harbor. So I think in some of these, there are enough residential spots, e.g. Crystal Beach, where you could have enough traffic walk up from those rental houses that you don't have at the harbor. So, but that's more of the distance from the facility parking. So that's the only thing I would say.
All right. Any other final comments? All right, do you guys have anything else for us on that topic?
If everyone here is good, we're good.
All right.
All right, the next one mixes everyone's favorite topic, short-term rentals and parking. So as of late, staff is noticing a trend that with short-term rentals, they are providing LSVs as an amenity. Well, when you do that, an LSV isn't something that you can park on the side somewhere, or, you know, generally they don't provide garages because they've either converted them or they just don't provide them, right? And so all the space that's not taken up by a building or a pool or a nice patio is dedicated to parking and landscaping. Well, then the LSV has to go in one of those required parking spaces. So staff recommends that in addition to the one space per bedroom requirement for short-term rentals, that there is also a requirement that they need to provide a space for at least one LSV. So that way that amenity that's part of the short-term rental is covered and does not take up a space for the one per bedroom parking requirement.
Yeah. Jump on in.
So, you know, I'm in Crystal Beach, and those, they tear down these, you know, out-of-town investors tear down these beautiful Florida cottages, and they put it these McMansions, and the entire front yard is now taken up with pavers, parking. And there are cars in the entire front yard. So how would you recommend that they would have space then for an LSV parking?
It's pretty much the same discussion that we would have with any developer that comes in. Here are the regulations. You need to show us how you're going to meet it.
So it's one space per bedroom.
Correct.
Plus
the LSV.
Plus LSV. So if you've got 10 bedrooms, you have 10 parking spaces, and now we have 11 spaces because we have one for the LSV.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Do you feel that?
May
Yeah,
I?
Would you please?
I completely disagree with that. I think that if it's 5-bedroom and it's 5 spaces, then one of those 5 spaces should be the LSV. I don't think it should be 5 plus an LSV space. One, and my other thing I want to add is the poker run was this past weekend. Do you know how many driveways were full of boats or boat trailers that were at short-term rentals? I know 2 on my drive home specifically where they had enough room for one car because the rest of the was taken up by these ginormous long cigarette boat. I mean, and what's the enforcement on that when it comes to parking? So, yeah, I don't agree with that.
I would think the LSV requirement is probably a non-starter with most of us. After all, we're trying to encourage that, and so we're going to make it more difficult for them to have one.
Just repeat what you said. I just didn't catch it all. I'm sorry.
I said the requirement for the LSV parking spots is probably a non-starter with the majority of us. We want to encourage their use, yet we want to make it harder for you to have one. That's not the way to do it. To make that simple, I'm not in favor of that.
I think the problem that we all run into for those of us that live within the short-term rental communities, or the communities that have short-term rentals, I should say, or areas of the city, is we have a hard enough time with them wanting to bring more than they're permitted, limited. At a short-term rental committee meeting recently, I made the comment about speed limits. Speed limit is 75 on Interstate 10. That's what you're supposed to go. Occupancy is 2 plus 4, 2 per bedroom plus 4. That's the limit. It's not 2 plus 4 and, oh, here, come on, bring a couple more. So I think we need to stick to what our limits are and not try to add additional. Because I drove down Highway 98 just past Mr. Bagby's house today. There was an 8-seater LSV, 10-seater. It was 4 rows and 2 on the back, and I was thinking to myself, my gosh, that thing is as long as a bus. And all they have to do is go down the street and rent it from the A-frame that's down in Walton County and bring it over into Destiny. And then how many spaces does that take? I don't know. I just think we really need to think really long and hard about, or not, maybe not long and hard, but really on the intensity of that kind of stuff.
Just for clarity standpoint, because this is it's a balancing act here. We're trying to ensure. On one hand, we're hearing there are challenges for parking with short-term rentals. So are you going towards eliminating one of those parking spaces that are required for having a short-term rental today and allow it for use by an LSV? Is that your intent? Allowed to have 4 parking spaces by virtue of the number of bedrooms you got. We are saying add another one for LSV just because now it's an amenity. And you are saying, no, they should use one of those parking spaces.
That is what I'm saying.
Okay.
I'm saying if they're allowed 4, then they should have 3 cars and 1 spot for their LSV.
But right now, the law says they should have 4 parking spaces.
I'm saying 4 parking spaces are 4 parking spaces. I don't care what you put in it. It doesn't matter to me what you put in it, but only 4. Because the more vehicles that you bring, no matter what they are, let's flip it for a moment. If I'm a resident and I have an LSV, it's probably in my garage. It's not out parked in the right-of-way. It's not out parked on the grass. It's not. And most of the people who are renting the LSVs are here for more than 2 or 3 days. They're usually here for the week. But you get that on top of, little Johnny, he wants to drive one because he's 16, but he doesn't have a car or whatever the new law is. We also have new laws in the state of Florida that don't allow a certain age to even drive them. So yes, to answer your question, if you're allowed to have 4 parking spots, it doesn't matter to me what they are in them. It doesn't matter to me if it's a car, if it's a boat trailer, it doesn't matter. That's all you're allowed. That's where I would like to keep it, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from.
I'm glad for that clarification. However, I think I take Lewis's point. You just reduced the number of parking spaces by 1, and while you can rent that LSV in Walton County, you can't drive it down from Georgia. And so I think we're actually loosening up the parking requirements for short-term rentals, which I don't think is something that Marcy would like.
I don't think your short-term rental committee would advise that.
There we go, clear as mud.
Jump on in.
For once, I'll have to agree with Ms. Marcy, my good friend. We're finally on the same page. I agree with her. You get 4 spaces. One of them is going to be an LSV, and you have 3 cars. I drive by Mr. Bagby's house all the time, and these popular place. Yeah, and these LSVs are, driven by the STRs, and they don't know how to drive, and it's, I don't know. I don't want to get off topic, but when you're talking about parking spaces, I just look at those houses that have cars just stacked one on top of another in their front yards, and there's really no other place to put the amenity of an LSV unless they take it around back, which I don't think they can do because their setbacks are so tight. But anyway, I agree with Ms. Marcy.
My only concern here is that obviously, like with new construction, we'd be forcing somebody to put an LSV spot in there, right? That's what we're saying with this. And, somebody could come in and build a spec house or whatever they're going to do and say, we might not ever have an LSV there. And why do we have to do that if there's no guarantee that there's ever going to be an LSV here. So I could just envision a lot of builders and developers coming to the table and saying, what do I have to do this for because we don't know what's going to happen one way or another.
Or they could say, I'm going to go ahead and put an LSV even though I don't have one, probably never have one, but now we've just been able to expand our parking space by however many feet an LSV would take.
Jump on in.
Yeah, I drive by my house a lot.
The gate must be open.
Yeah, it's, every day I drive by a couple of times. And that 8-seater is in the rental house next to me. No, I don't know, but I'll check tonight. It's a 10-seater. Oh, okay, good. First of all, I appreciate y'all's recommendation. I think you have an enforcement problem, which they've pointed out. What if there's 2 spaces in the garage and there's 2 spaces in the driveway and now there's a 5th space? There's going to be a big truck there, or there's going to be something there. You know, the smallest car is going to go there, and now a house that is permitted 4 cars is going to have 5, or if it's 5, it's going to have 6. And I agree with the folks on the committee. If it's got a license plate, it's a vehicle, and it counts. And I don't care. We don't tell people you can't bring a F-250 long bed down here. We don't tell them you can't bring a boat and a trailer, although you can't park the boat in our neighborhood and you can't park it on the street. But, you know, these people are coming now with Sprinter vans, and 15 people are getting out of that Sprinter van, which is fine if, you know, that's what the house holds. But I don't think we ought to dictate what you can park there, other than if it's got a license plate, it's got to have an authorized parking spot. And the ones that don't, you know, the little 2-seat, 4-seat golf carts that aren't LSVs, that shouldn't be out on our highways, that I've talked to the sheriff about, most of those people park in their garage because they don't want them being out in the elements. They don't want them, you know, I had one for 15 years, well, you know, that was a great debate. That was why originally I had asked that the parking spots be on the square footage of the house, because I've seen too many developers go, oh, this is a mud room and this is a media room and this is that room, but they all have attached bathrooms to them. And, you know, 3 months after they get their, you know, certificate of occupancy, they're bedrooms. Go figure how that happened. So I would just keep it simple. Whatever parking they have authorized, let them decide what they want to park there. And then they can go find off-site parking, which a lot of the renters in our neighborhood do. They go park, you know, they find a place to park at the storage unit or some other friend's house or some other neighbor's house in Atlanta who only brought 2 cars and they have 2 additional parking spots. Don't try to solve it for them. You got a license plate, your vehicle, that's how many you can park there.
Yeah, the off-site parking, that was my only last comment, was I think whether it's what we identified through the multimodal plan, where under the FP&L easement over there, I think on Dolphin Street, that there's a potential parking lot there. I mean, I think that would solve this, you know, they come down with 8 cars and there's only 4 requirement, and someone dropped the ball and didn't tell them, you know, I don't think it should be on-site parking, but I think we should do our job to try to find off-site parking that, you know, that we can still bill and pay the daily rates on. So I would hope we could really work on getting that mobility plan parking lot over there up and running, because I think that helps offset potentially some bad business owners that are just not communicating well, maybe not bad business owners, but didn't communicate well the requirements and the restrictions of the area. So that's what I'm hoping we can get out of that.
May I add one more thing?
Jump on in.
I don't remember what meeting it was. I attend so many and speak so many times. Hell, I could have written it on the internet. But I have suggested somewhere that we start maybe having the LSV companies register that are doing business in the city of Destin, similar to the livery vessels. And I think maybe that will help with our LSVs that aren't registered, don't have license plates. There's a lot going on. I think there's something that Walton County does. I'm not real sure. I haven't looked into it. But my point being is, we have people who are driving, I saw one last night, driving down the sidewalk on Highway 98, right in front of the old Golden Corral. They were 6 of them, and they were just having a good time riding right down that sidewalk. Yes, I can call the sheriff's department by the time they get, unless I
The sheriff
follow them.
he got him.
He did?
Yeah, I was
Okay.
about a half an hour later, I rode by there and saw a sheriff's car behind that.
Okay, good. But my point being is, we've got them riding with kids that don't have seat belts on. They've got kids in carriers. I've talked about it a million times in different places. But at some point, I had suggested somewhere about us having a registration system for the companies, because I think most of the companies are coming out of Walton County.
Well, that's my question is, I thought if a business is in Destin, then the business has to be registered. But if we have a company that's out of Walton County, how are we going to enforce that unless we go to all the businesses that are out there that are in Walton County or on the other side of Fort Walton?
I don't know the details. I just know it was my thought process. It was just because I see them driving in and they have like 6 or 8 carts on a trailer and they're bringing them onto Holiday Isle and they're delivering them. And I know they're coming in from Walton County. They're not the guys here in Destin. And if we can get some sort of a system where they've got like a medallion or the sticker or whatever you want to call it on each one that they're bringing in, then we know that they're giving them some type of education, because clearly they don't have any.
All right, I think, you get that to Ms. Marcy, I respect you, but I think there'd be an enforcement issue with that. Also, I know in the spring, the sheriff in Walton County, and I'm sure Okaloosa as well, had a seminar with all of the LSV providers, all the rental companies, and told them, and gave them little placards and said, tell your customers, your clients, to stay off the sidewalk, to honor the stop signs, and yada, yada, stay off 98. So that may be a sheriff's issue and not necessarily a city of Destin issue.
I think now that I'm thinking about it, it was in a different meeting, and the meeting was basically about code compliance and giving them something that they would be able to help enforce when there's not sheriff's deputies around, I think is what my whole point was, is it was another tool for code compliance to use to help in that respect. Ms. Kopp, do you remember that conversation? Is that where it was? I think so. Okay, thank you.
All right, anything?
Yeah, just to
Back on the
Marcy's
topic.
point, I think what you're talking about is the sheriff requires every LSV, and they made a sticker up, and they actually made signs that basically going out toward 98 says, if you're on 98, you're going to get arrested and you're going to have to walk back. And if we could probably just get more copies of those little stickers and put them, they're usually right below the driver on the windshield on the inside, and just get more copies of those stickers and say, if you rent a cart in Destin, in the city limits of Destin, it's got to have that sticker. And if we find out that it doesn't, then you're going to get to come pick that golf cart up.
Hey, it's just hard. I mean, you're not, somebody that wants to drive a golf cart down the sidewalk is not, they're going to drive it regardless.
And somebody who wants to drink and
They can listen to
drive.
whatever videotape or whatever instruction. If they're, I mean, let's all use common sense. If you're driving a golf cart down the side of Highway 98 when there's 65-mile-an-hour traffic, that person is always going to do it. We
Well,
can't-
it's no different than a drunk driver. They're going to get in the car
but
and
you
drive no
just gotta
matter
let,
what.
I mean, you got to let them go, and they got to get pulled over, and then they learn their lesson. But those people are always going to show up here. The other issue we have, and we all know it, is, I mean, we've got a United States highway going through the middle of our town. There's a lot of people that go vacation in beach towns, and they feel like they can take a golf cart anywhere. But here, you shouldn't do it for your own safety.
They don't call it Bloody 98 for a reason.
It's just hard. You're never going to.
I think
win that battle.
enforcement is a huge issue with that, too. We
All right,
really don't.
anything else on the parking requirements of this? Oh, yeah, I was just getting back on the parking on this, for the short-term rental LSV parking. I know we went on a tangent there, but I think it was productive, but I wanted to make sure our staff got the information they needed out of this.
Can I make a recommendation that we go ahead and move to item 7, being that it's discussing parking as well? Or it pertains to parking as well? Go ahead and get it off the plate.
Yeah, we got one more item on this one, and then I was actually going to recommend we move to item 7 after this third bicycle parking discussion. So
All right.
thank you for that.
Any further discussions on the parking requirement, short-term rental? All right, take it
All
away.
right. All right, so the next one's bicycle parking. So we We currently have two ways of identifying how much bicycle parking you're required. There's a percentage that ranges from 0 to 20%, minimum 5%, 5 to 20%. Many uses don't require bicycle parking. And then for schools or other like uses, it's based on the number of students in total or classrooms. So this is obviously, that range can get very convoluted and confusing and can be burdensome at times for not only just staff, but the developers as well. It's also fairly unique. Most communities around just have a standard 1% is what you're required, and then they do have that for schools, because obviously schools are a different use than a commercial use. So staff's recommending that a 1% be applied to the uses that do require bicycle parking currently in our code. Staff's shooting right down the middle at 10%, and then we'll leave the school bicycle parking requirement as it is.
That sounds great. I love it. 10%.
What's the current requirement in our code?
So it varies, like I said, from 5 to 20%. So many retail spaces require 10%. I can't remember the 20. There's a couple 20%, but then all the way down to 5 for, I believe, some restaurant uses. Maybe I'm going off of some.
The percent of
percentage of required parking spaces. My apologies. Is that where you're going, Mr. Destin? Okay, so if you're required 100 spaces, there's a percent that whatever the 10%, you'd be required 10 bicycle parking spaces. My apologies. 10% across the board.
Would this go under like residential short-term rentals as well, as far as the biking requirement racks?
So residential uses do not require bicycle parking. So.
Okay.
It's great, but I've had a bicycle rack now in my restaurant for right at 20 years, and I've never had more than 3 or 4 bicycles in it. I mean, it's a feel-good thing. I guess we can keep feeling good.
Yeah, my only observation would be over at AJ's, 'cause I was working the Poker Run, and it seems like the bicycles are more of a staff thing. It's more of the people riding there for work on the e-bikes and everything. Yeah, I would like to think that they're doing it for the health of it, but some might not have a license. But I think it's a feel-good thing. But at the same time, I think there should definitely be a requirement, because if we're trying to have this multimodal plan and encourage and require walkability, I think the bike racks are just an end point to it all. All right, so everyone good with 10%? Any other ups or downs? Everyone pretty non-negotiable? All right, cool.
Okay, and as Councilman King suggested, we're going to bump forward to number 7, which is maximum distance for walking, for off-site parking. And since the first discussion delved into that off-site parking, this falls right into that. So off-site parking currently, there's only certain districts that you can do this in. As we discussed earlier, the Harbor District and CBR, Crystal Beach Resort zoning districts, you can provide it in. There's a maximum distance that you can provide it for, and it's measured from the front door of the primary use to the property line of where you're providing that off-site parking. And takes into no consideration the actual existing or future pedestrian network. Okay? Well, if you go to walkscore.com, which is it's been around for quite some time, and it's kind of the industry standard when it comes to measuring a community's walkability. They recommend the highest score, like a walker's paradise is what I believe the term that they use, is a quarter of a mile. About 5 minutes or so. And then the next step down would be half a mile. So what staff is asking is for direction on whether to, 1, look at how we measure the off-site parking. Should we maintain it at the front door to the property, straight line distance, or by the way that the pedestrian, the closest or the shortest pedestrian network from the primary use to the off-site parking space or parking lot? And then is 1/4 of a mile the maximum that you can go, or is half a mile the maximum?
Are you talking about as the crow flies?
So currently, yes. So currently, it's from the front door of the primary use, 1,200 feet by the way the crow flies, to the property line of where the parking lot, the off-site parking is provided.
Is this affected one way or another? I mean, what if you've got, let's say that somebody's got a lot a mile down the road from their restaurant, but they're running a shuttle to pick up all those people?
So that'd be valet, and there's a whole other section for valet.
So the shuttle's protected by the valet?
Correct. Yeah, this is specific to
That's
if you're not going to provide valet. If you're not going to provide valet and you're going to require your patrons, and it also only applies to required parking spaces.
So does walkscore.com say if after you get past whatever that is, X amount, 1,200 feet or whatever the amount is, that, you know, something becomes deemed unsafe or
No,
unwalkable or?
it's basically, you get a score, the scale degrades from 5 minutes to 30 minutes, and so
I mean,
at 30
there's
minutes.
part of me that says, hey, you know, if somebody wants to park 3 miles over there and walk to your restaurant, then that's their priority. I wouldn't do it, but that's just a thought.
Yeah, so the purpose of this is if someone wants to do that, there's nothing stopping them currently from doing that, as long as they're in a legal parking space and they're not trespassing, and right, there's nothing stopping that right now. This is a way to protect patrons from forcing them to walk, especially in the middle of the summer where it's sweltering, the sun is beating down on you, right? And you're already tired and you're forced to walk a mile because there's no on-site parking for you and the off-site parking is a mile away, right? You just got off your livery, you got off your charter, you're tired already, and now you gotta walk. Like that kind of sets up kind of what you were alluding to, that unsafe aspect of it.
And we are sanctioning it.
Yep.
Well, as Mr. Mayor said earlier, I mean, obviously, we would prefer that not all the property is gobbled up by parking lots on the north side of Mountain Drive, and they're just facilitating all the restaurants, because that doesn't help the whole overall feel and commerce of the city. So maybe if there's a way for this to protect or put some restraints on that.
So it would also apply to if, let's use that fee in lieu program as well. Like if you're going to buy into that, then whatever parking lot, whatever public parking space or public parking garage, it has to be within whatever the maximum that the LPA and City Council agree upon, and then eventually gets approved. So you couldn't, if someone's got a restaurant on the far east end of the Harbor District, but wants to buy in on a parking garage or a public parking space, on the far west end, but the maximum's a half mile, you couldn't do that. The restaurant owner couldn't do that. Does that kind of help answer your question?
I definitely think that as the crow flies is kind of ridiculous. I definitely think it should be like the shortest walkable route.
Agreed.
It should be calculated that way.
Well, I just have one comment. Having used off-site parking, when it gets more than 200 or 300 feet, they don't use it. You can make your employees use it by threatening to fire them if they don't. But the customers, if it's very far, they're not going to do it. It's used as a way of providing more parking. When you get over that distance, no one is realistically going to use it. Do we want to allow them to have a way to have more parking? Perhaps, but the distances are much shorter than what we have and what we have historically had. And of course, the other question is, as you brought up earlier, we allow it in 3 areas now, off-site?
So standalone parking lots are allowed in 3 districts: permitted, North Harbor, and institutional and conditional in town center.
So what's not a standalone? Define what standalone means.
Standalone means that there's no primary use on the lot except for a parking lot.
And so it's not associated with a business?
Correct.
Okay. Well, like I say, can't get them to use it if it's very far away. And the idea of using a pedestrian walk is a good idea, unless we start building new sidewalks through the middle of things, and then they can be closer. But I have no real opposition to using that as a measurement, but, you know, if they get too far away, people don't use them.
So currently it's at 1,200. That's the longest. If we don't want to get away from the 1,200, we'll maintain 1,200. If council and LPA deem 1/4 mile is too long, half mile is too long, yeah, we can certainly shorten it up.
Yeah, but we're talking about more than just restaurants. What about, about the beach as well? So can you walk a half a mile to the beach?
So beaches don't have required parking. Yeah. Well, so parks do,
Yeah.
but it's very
I was
minimal.
thinking of a parking lot, a standalone parking lot just for beach access.
Correct.
So how would that be zoned? Or would it?
It generally would be recreationally zoned, and then I believe there's handicap parking spaces required for parks, but as far as 10 spaces per X amount of square feet, there isn't.
All right, you were asking, staff was asking for either half mile or a 1/4 mile?
That's just our recommendation right now, based on what the industry standard is, deems good.
Okay.
Obviously, there's a sentiment that even a 1/4 mile is too much. So again, these are just the recommendations that we as staff have, and certainly open to other suggestions.
Well, I like your half mile recommendation. That's where I would hang my hat.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like based off what everybody's saying, and Mr. Destin even, I mean, we're overthinking this because once we get past 300 to 500 feet, it's a dead issue. So let's go with half a mile. And,
I
in
would
all
support
seriousness,
I would support
let's
the
move
half
on.
mile.
So, yeah, and on that half mile thought, so the comp plan has 2 parking garages in the harbor, and I know that we're talking, it's more than just the harbor, but I think the half mile, 1/4 mile only really has an effect on the harbor if we're going to have 2 nodes of parking. Half mile would encompass basically Marlar parking lot, the example being that it goes all the way down to the lighthouse. So the whole harbor could encompass that half mile from Marlar. And so the half mile would allow us to build 1 parking deck, and everyone could offload in the lieu of payment in that case. But to y'all's point of, will they all go there to go to the whole harbor is a whole other I mean, if the idea is to open it up so that we can get a parking deck, I'm all for whatever allows us to get the parking deck. So I think the half mile would allow us to get more in lieu of payments from the harbor district, and potentially some more commerce over in Crystal Beach if that's the way it works. But I'm for the half mile as well. And anyone else want to chime in on your guys' thoughts?
I would ask the question, the half mile wouldn't apply to a municipal parking lot anyway, would it? We put those where we think they should be.
Yeah, yes, the half mile would apply to if a business wants to set up here, that municipal parking lot would have to be within a half mile for you to be able to utilize it. So it's not that we say a municipal parking lot has to be every half mile, it's just within a half mile pedestrian walking distance, you can utilize it.
Okay.
Just so I'm clear, and if they use that as part of their account, they would have to pay the fee.
Yes, and that fee, as discussed earlier, in the harbor districts, is set by council.
Okay.
Last time we really did a study on it, it was more like 40 to 60,000 a space.
A space?
A space,
Just
yeah.
to build it, not
To go vertical,
To build it, unless we're going to sell it at discounts, that's the price.
Yeah, so I'm okay with that, I guess. I think what you'll find is what we found in Rosemary Beach, where anybody north of 30A, they all got in the Suburban. They put all their beach toys in their Suburban. Dad drove them down to the Western Green, dropped everybody off. Dad drove the Suburban back to the rental house, which was, 1,500 feet away, and parked the Suburban, and then Dad did the 5-minute walk down to the beach.
Sounds like my weekend.
And it's like, God, it's a 5-minute walk. I can walk this entire, but I'm okay as long as they're paying for that. Otherwise, I'm happy with the 1,200 feet, to be honest with you.
Thank you. All right, let's move back to item 2, which is,
Before we leave that one, did we come to any conclusion about whether we should expand the off-site parking to any other areas? Anybody have an opinion on that?
I mean, unofficial, it looked like LPA's more in favor for the half. You guys were half or a quarter. What were you guys saying? I don't want to put words in your mouth. The half mile?
Yeah.
That's,
That was a different question than
Oh,
what you're
oh, I'm
asking.
so sorry.
I
My bad.
think,
My
I-
question
so
is-
I think it's because Steve O'Connor had just mentioned that the off-site parking lots, or let me say it differently, standalone parking lots are only allowed in 3 zoning districts. TCMU is a conditional use, and then they're permitted in institutional and North Harbor. So that means nowhere on South Harbor, nowhere near Calhoun, nowhere in any other zoning district of the city are standalone parking lots allowed. So it is a question for the city council. Is that something we want to keep in place, or do we want to expand that?
Yeah, I would like to see it at least at a maximum conditional, and I know we'd have some informing at that point, but I think we'd make it a conditional use for North Harbor for the mixed-use area of Mountain.
Are you saying expand it to additional districts as a conditional use, or where it's?
Oh, no, where it's
allowed?
permittable, make it conditional, especially if we're trying to have a parking garage. I mean, the condition would be, why not invest into the parking garage with us instead of having your own? And if they have a good reason, sure, have a condition for it. But I mean, the idea is we need to focus up and have a centralized parking area. So to allow people to have their own off-site parking defeats the purpose of public parking.
now here's the only downside.
Give me the history.
The only downside to that public parking, where unless we have some restrictive conditions in place about the public parking, if we can build enough public parking, or if we build quite a bit more public parking, then we can do nothing but high density all through the harbor. So do we want high density? And high density is not necessarily tied to the height. Some of the most dense projects in this town are not high-rises. So do we want to build these parking garages so that we can have even more high-density development? Personally, I do not. So if we have enough high density, or getting very close to it, in my opinion, I don't think the citizens want us to pile a bunch more in. If we put 300 or 400 townhouses or apartments somewhere, as long as they can get the parking, and they could by buying it in the parking garage, then we've basically taken the tethers off of that kind of construction. So we need to be very aware of what we're doing when we do that.
so in the Harbor District, I just want to kind of list off a few zoning districts that live within the Harbor District. We've got obviously South Harbor mixed use. I don't think there's an intent to allow standalone parking in the South Harbor district, or South Harbor mixed use. But then there's North Harbor where it's currently permitted, institutional where it's currently permitted, but then you also have CTS, commercial trades and services. We have ROI VR, ROI. And then we've got Calhoun mixed use and Calhoun mixed use village, recreational, medium density residential village, and then, so that's Harbor District, that covers about all of them. And then the other place where we allow off-site parking is in the Crystal Beach Resort District, zoning district, not the Crystal Beach area. But in the Crystal Beach area, we have obviously Crystal Beach Resort, Crystal Beach Neighborhood, ROITD, institutional, recreational, ROI, CBR, quite a few. So those other districts that weren't included in the North Harbor Institutional and Town Center, those don't allow for that standalone parking. So I believe the question is, do we want to allow standalone parking in those zoning districts?
And that is the question. I've not been able to come to an understanding of the rationality of letting it happen in those three districts, and then not letting it happen in other districts that are mixed use that clearly have substantial commercial use. So, you know, I'm not sure of the rationale behind restricting it out of those districts. So that's something we can think about.
Anyone else?
I mean, it's a good time to be thinking about it because staff has this Article 4 that's about to go to LPA. So they're here and at least they can hear council's thoughts on it. So when they further make recommendations and it comes back to you again, they have some idea that you all are thinking about this and where it would be appropriate to allow or not allow that.
When you were flipping through the sides, I thought I saw a zoning map. I may have seen, can you pull that map back up and just go point out, I don't know if anybody's got a laser or whatever, here, 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 and here.
There we go.
Okay.
All right.
Can you do it on this map back here so most of
Yes,
us
sir.
can see?
All right, so this thick line here that I'm outlining here, that's the harbor
Right.
planning area, harbor district, okay? You got South Harbor right there, and then North Harbor is generally located north of 98, south of Mountain. Okay, so that's where it's currently permitted. And then institutional, which is this dark blue spots, okay? Those are the only two districts in the harbor planning area, harbor district, where standalone parking lots are allowed. The only other district within the city that standalone parking lots are allowed is TCMU, which is this big old light blue chunk here, which is in the town center planning area, town center district, CRA, okay? So as you can see, there are multiple other colors within the harbor district. Got that yellow right there, you got some medium density right there, some low density and Bay Estates right there. This is the CMUV, that medium-ish blue, then you got CMU, which is the lighter blue, and then some recreational on the other side, and then that little area, that's South Harbor mixed use right there. And then obviously down here, here's Crystal Beach. So the darker purple along the southern edge is the CBR, Crystal Beach Resort. And that's where that offsite, if you're going to do offsite parking, that's the only zoning district where it is allowed. Obviously though, within the the Crystal Beach planning area, there's quite a few more zoning districts.
DC Town Center mixed use, right?
Well, a standalone parking lot is allowed.
Right.
So that's why Chick-fil-A was able to build a parking lot without a primary use on it. And therefore, technically it's not really off-site parking, it's just a parking lot that they own and can control.
And that's the point I make. I don't understand the difference in mixed use at the town center and mixed use in other parts of the city and what the rationale was behind prohibiting it in others, but allowing it in that one.
So it sounds like allowing standalone parking in mixed-use districts might be appropriate.
Unless we know what the rationale for prohibiting it was, then I don't get it.
Yeah, and that's the issue for us, that we researched and we couldn't find the reasons for it, and that's why I bring it up.
So that's basically the problem, is that you've been trying to figure out why were areas picked and not picked and allowed and not allowed. So now trying to put everything right, you're trying to make sure we agree with how we're going to appropriate where parking or non-parking is allowed.
Yeah, exactly, because we see some contradictions throughout the
And
place.
yes, and I'm glad that you brought it here. I'm sure it's going to help for us to discuss this before a meeting anyway. So thank you.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but typically in mixed-use development, everybody brings their own. So if I'm doing Live Works, I'm whatever, or I'm putting a Publix in or whatever, I'm providing my parking. I'm not providing off-site parking because it's a Live Work or it's a mixed use. So you got a mix of residential and commercial, both of which have parking requirements.
Ideally, yes.
Okay. Because I think
that's the intent.
That's my memory of why when we started the whole mixed use and the, the new urbanists, we're going to have these town centers, or these mixed use developments, and we're not going to have 28 stories of residential or, something with just parking down below, surrounded by parking. It's going to be 50 feet, and it's going to be mixed use. There's going to be shared parking, restaurants in the evenings, dress shops in the mornings or whatever. And that's how we got there. But that doesn't mean that's where we are now or that we have to stay there.
So we'll take a look at that and come up with some options. Yeah.
Looks like we're good. Next topic? All right. On to open space. All right, so
90%.
currently, there is a slight contradiction between the definition of open space in the comprehensive plan and in the LDC. And I get it confused. So the comprehensive plan includes pervious green space and impervious hardscaping, okay? While the LDC is very specific to vegetative pervious surfaces at ground level that is unobstructed from ground level to the sky and is not occupied by any building coverage or impervious surfaces. So there's a contradiction. Staff's just asking for clarity on which direction to go so that we can get everything on the same page and moving forward, and there's no issues moving forward with future development.
Do you have a recommendation? How do you want what kind of verbiage do you want in there?
So, it's tough. So, in many communities, open space means non-impervious space.
Okay, you want to write that up? Well, I accept that. That sounds good. I mean, you guys are the experts. I mean, you deal with this stuff all the time. So.
Yeah, but our challenge though is the type of lots that we have here. And so we're trying to balance out what's more effective. Typically, you would say defer back to the comprehensive plan because that's a policy aspect of it. But there's probably a reason why the LDC was written the way it was. Things must have been difficult, and then the ordinance was tweaked. So if that's the case, we're trying to search for what was the impetus for going that direction instead of sticking out with the policy.
Yeah, I mean, even as like a tree guy, I think for something like South Harbor District, there's not going to be much grass that would grow there anyways. And if the intent is open space for the sake of having, shoulder room, I don't think it matters if you're on a dirt mound or, a concrete slab when it comes to maybe the commercial areas. And I think, and this is just commercial are we talking about that you guys need, or is this everything?
This is everything, and each zoning district has its own open space requirement percentage. Generally, in residential districts, it's about 25. Commercial, it's about 30-ish, and it ranges up and down, left and right of that. And so the nuance to that is currently we allow impervious surfaces to be included in that. Well, if we no longer include that impervious surface, then that creates a problem there because now the walkway that they take from the parking area to their home or their patio is no longer included in that open space calculation. And so now they need to provide even more green space, which gets to the point that Lewis was just making. Our lot sizes are generally a little unique around here, and it's already small and difficult and can be burdensome at times. So providing the clarity is the main issue. Which one do we want to go with? Pervious or no pervious? Pervious space only, or do we want to also include the impervious? And then once we hash out that, we can kind of discuss the percentages from there.
I would think,
if changes.
Yeah, I tend to agree with Lewis. If we include that in, it makes it very onerous to meet the standards. And after all, even sometimes then, it gets complicated. A deck down on the harbor, is that pervious or impervious? Is that open space or not open space? Yep. It, in fact, is made of boards with gaps, and it's definitely not impervious. So I don't think we need to complicate that issue any more than it already is. I would, open space, pervious.
Yeah, I'm probably going to disagree slightly. I like the LDC definition because it's not just to me, a decking issue, it's a stormwater issue. And so when you have sidewalks and you have concrete decks and you have concrete pools and you have, and we get a lot of rain around here at certain times of the year, that water's got to go someplace. And so I like, there's pervious pavers. You can use pervious pavers, and that, I'm okay with that. But if you make it a hardscape, a true hardscape, I'm not in favor of that. What I would do instead is say, okay, instead of 35%, maybe we set the pervious, the open space at 30% to kind of ameliorate the issue that Mr. Destin's talking to. But we need, the more water we can get onto sand, it doesn't have to be grass, but onto sand, onto grass, onto vegetation, onto something that allows it to perk down into the system is better, in my opinion. The more water we don't, ends up in the streets, or ends up in people's garages, or ends up someplace where we shouldn't want it to go. That, or you're going to have a bunch of swell, then we get back into the swales discussion. We dig a swale in front of everybody's house, and I don't want to really get in that discussion either. I just make it pervious, and then we can adjust, and we can say 35 to 28% or whatever. That's how I would do the rheostat on that, as opposed to just saying, yeah, it's okay if it's impervious.
And I can see that concept, but it gets a little complicated, and we have to look at it. Maybe percentage is the way to go, but sidewalks and ADA ramps are not open space if they're made out of concrete, because they are in fact impervious. And how much farther do we go in that direction?
Okay, so yeah, we'll look at that. The second part to this one is that if you look at the definition of open space within the LDC, it's what we call regulation by definition. And it's where there's a requirement for how you develop something in the definition rather than where the regulations actually are required. So, for example, with this open space, where it talks about how we measure and everything, how we measure open space, that should really belong in the landscaping section or wherever that ends up in the LDC, not in the definition. And so the next part of this would be to take all those types of definitions where it says how you do something rather than actually what it is. Because now you're explaining how is rather than what it is. So, make sense? Oh, man. All right, we good on that one?
I'd just like
I'm
to
sorry.
say, as a committee member, that I would have to agree with what Mr. Bagby said, only because I have lived in a situation where when there's nowhere for the water to go, it ends up on my street. But the swell program has helped. They just put those in, and it has helped. It'll be, the rainy season is coming, and that will tell us a whole new story.
And just to be clear on that, this has to be a blanket across all residential and commercial. It's just the percentage based on the district or the zone?
Yeah, it'd be, when we bring Article 4 back for a public discussion, I think we can dive into each zoning district and the percentages per zoning district. with the clear definition of what open space is.
Yeah.
then
I
we
would
can- then we
prefer to
can-
keep it perking
Yeah.
and reduce the percentage in commercial dense areas if that's the case.
Yep.
I want to say at a Public Works meeting, if I remember correctly, Michael Burgess had said that the percolating of the water through the sands takes about 18 minutes for a foot. Can someone tell me if that's correct?
That is not correct.
Okay, I don't remember.
Because every sand is different. You know, the beach sand is not the same as the sand that's out, you know, on the other side of your house as opposed to the sand that's out by Mr. Destin's
Right,
house.
right.
So you have to do a perk test on every lot, basically, because clay doesn't perk, you know, dirt perks, but not as fast as other dirt. So, yeah, that's an overgeneralization, I would
Well, not
say.
only that, I can dig probably a foot down and hit water at my place.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was just something that I had thought of.
Yeah.
All right. Moving on to the next one, residential landscaping. There's obviously a very clear intent in the city that we don't want to overburden residential ownership with landscaping and various sorts of requirements. And
Nonsense.
there was at one point, residential properties were no longer required to submit for a tree permit to cut a tree down. Okay. That's fine. The difficulty with that on our end is that landscaping and reforestation is a requirement of all development. The LDC does not make any differentiation between residential and commercial or non-residential development. And that is 1 tree per 1/10 of an acre. Well, if you've got half an acre, that's 5 trees, a property owner has 5 trees and decides to cut 2 of them down, well, now they're short 2 trees for the required landscaping, required reforestation. How is staff supposed to track that, enforce it? So can you see the difficulty in all that? So we're asking for some little bit of guidance on how. We do not have a recommendation. So we're really looking to y'all on that one.
I mean, obviously you can track new development and requests.
New development when they come in, yes, but once residential development is done,
Yeah.
we no longer require the tree
And I
permit
just
to
don't
cut
know
it
that
down.
there's a perfect way to skin that
Yep.
cat as far as having enough manpower. And I mean, I watch people on Calhoun cut trees down all the time, and I guarantee you, nobody knows about it. But, you know, some of these properties in the city have had, I mean, very mature trees on there for, gosh, I mean, Mr. Destin knows, eons. So to say, hey, oh my gosh, you just cut down 2 magnolia trees and you got 46 other different trees on your property and we're gonna make you replant 3 of them. And I don't know how you can do it. I don't know how you can, the staff needs to be out doing other things with the city than chasing trees. I mean, I hate to be that blunt about it, but it's just manpower wise, I don't know how you can do it.
And that's the direction that staff's looking for, because like I said, there's no differentiation between residential and non-residential development. So if the intent is to not have that requirement for residential development, that's fine.
And we tried this at some point many years ago, didn't we?
The tree or.
Well, that's what I'm
yeah,
saying.
it went sideways
Well,
real
there's
quick.
just, we realized there was no way to wrap
Okay.
your arms around it, and
Yeah, so if there's an intent to just pull residential development other than new
no,
development.
it got
for-
rough, and they realized it was a bad idea real quick, and we shut it down, everybody walked away, but
And Mr. Destin will correct me because I'm sure I'm wrong, but that, when we almost got shot, was because we were telling people they couldn't cut down a 4-inch tree or a 3-inch tree, or they had to have an arborist come out and and I'm like, are you flipping kidding me? You know, I don't have a problem with the reforestation because what I don't want to see is a bunch of empty lots with no trees on there. So if they've got, you know, a requirement to have 5 trees and they cut 3 of them down, and they don't ever go get a permit to fix up their house or remodel their house, I guess we'll never find it. But when they come in to get a permit, that's when I would say, you could say, okay, when you go out to check on the permit, just put on the checklist, oh, by the way, you need to add 5 trees on that size of a lot? That's not that many. I thought this was going to be about something entirely different. I thought this was about the reforestation of the commercial lots next to the residential lots, and you were going to come in and tell us 5 trees is not enough because you won't screen that commercial activity from all that. I didn't realize, maybe I just misread the thing, but I thought that's what we were going to talk about, not the...
I was coming from a screening idea as well.
Yeah, that's what I thought it was about. I didn't think it was, I don't care, but if they have 1 tree on their lot, on their half-acre lot, no, that's, it's the guy who authored the tree ordinance, the original one, not the one where we want people to get an arborist to approve cutting a 4-inch tree, But I don't know. I would say you don't go out as this conversation we have about code enforcement, being proactive versus reactive. Okay, this is not a proactive code enforcement thing. This isn't like parking in the right of way or the 3 or 4 things that we said you be proactive on this. But this is hey, if I want to increase my house by 1,000 square feet and I've chopped down every tree on my lot to do that, and you go out and you go, oh, on this size lot, you got to have 5 trees. Where are your 5 trees? Oh, well, they're all gone because I wouldn't be able to get my, screened-in patio with my, my lanai and my pool behind my house if I had those trees there, type thing. I would rather have a conversation on, I want to make sure we are adequately screening commercial properties from residential.
I mean, if we want to have that conversation, we have that conversation right now. The landscaping requirements are, coming up. They're not part of, the landscaping requirements are part of Article 4, but we can certainly earmark that for later discussion.
And right now you're saying they run parallel? They're the same requirements, residential and commercial?
Yes, there is no differentiation. It's 1 tree per 1/10 of an acre.
Just double it and call it a day. For commercial. 2 per eighth.
Is there anything in our residential landscaping as far as like how people having to cut their yard if their grass is 3 feet high? I've had neighbors ask me that.
Yeah.
By the way, there's also a requirement for a wall between residential and commercial right now.
In some zoning districts.
With respect to your question, that's something that the building division and code compliance are collaborating to write that ordinance.
Thanks.
I would say just if I would like the idea where we were headed as far as make it a reactive of if they're coming out for a permit. My only other suggestion was, if we bump up, not double it, but if we just bumped up the requirement, if a tree or 2 goes away over time, we're still within the limits of what we need without having to be another level of oversight government. So for me, it would potentially be, if it's really a non-touch issue, maybe we just add it to the front end, knowing that a couple trees might get damaged, destroyed, or taken out manually over time, and it still falls under that threshold that we were looking for.
Can I go?
Yeah.
No.
My bad.
No, I'm messing with you. I don't know. I think I probably fall somewhere in the middle maybe, but, I bought that property fair and square. If I want to get rid of my trees, I'm going to get rid of my trees. Now, I don't think that we're going to I don't think it's going to be like, in elementary school when they said, if you're on fire, you stop, drop, and roll. I thought I was going to be on fire a whole lot more than I have been, And I think this is sort of the same thing. It's like, I don't think we're going to have to, I don't think it's going to be that as big an issue as we, suppose it might be. I like the idea of in the permitting process and then certainly in new development. But, I think it's a little bit of an overreach, in my opinion.
Yeah. My only concern would be just the chopping of the mature trees, and then they come in there with 1-inch trees, and it's going to take 20 years to get up there. But, I will concede and not say that that's a difference, I guess. Councilman
Well,
Dustin?
that is the question do we contemplate protecting any trees at all? 4
Please.
inches or whatever the standard was where we got so much angst from the community, but do we intend to protect 12-inch, 24-inch, 36-inch?
Yes.
The biggest complaint I
Absolutely.
get yelled at every other week is, did you see the tree they cut down on that line?
Yeah. From FP&L
Don't we-
butchering the tree line,
Don't we have an ordinance?
It's like this.
Yeah,
and I agree.
and I understand if you go too far in that direction, people like Johnny who bought a lot and want to put a house on, can't build a house. But is there any compromise in between? I don't, it's very difficult, but I kind of like trees and I've never really
Yeah,
cut any down with my.
I'm happy to get hung
They've stuck
and
around and
put
cut 'em
another
around
tree
me.
ordinance together. I'm happy to be the one. I'll stick my neck out there, but yeah, I think there's 4 inches is different than a 20-inch circumference, grandmother tree.
joke.
Yeah, and back to stormwater. I mean, trees suck up hundreds of gallons. A mature tree sucks up hundreds of gallons in that first hour of rainfall. So, instead of a ditch, you could have a mature tree there. So it's definitely more than just an aesthetic land issue. It's also stormwater again. Hundreds of gallons of mature tree on the first hour. Yep.
Trees on the coast, he knows.
Trees on the coast. A non-certified arborist, so, take that with a little grain of salt. We're also non-certified planners, but here we are giving them recommendations.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe there's a stormwater trade-off there, if we're trying to be let people build, but also if stormwater turns into an issue for a requirement restriction, maybe having mature trees on a lot is a benefit to developing on it and keeping them. So trying to have instead of a stick, maybe there's a carrot in there to promote and encourage them to have these trees for other trade-offs of requirements. Right? Anyone else? Any other good, bad, and different ideas?
I like the idea of having a permit for removing a legacy tree. And to Mr.
Yeah, I agree.
Mr. Destin's point, if you want to build a house and you've got a legacy tree in the middle of your lot, to have a city permit and say you can cut this down because there's going to be a house on it. But if you have it in the front yard, you don't get the permit to be able to cut it down.
Yeah, almost.
I don't know how much we'll catch over that.
I think if we walk it out very methodically on the what is required and not required in the permit, I think there might be not so much of a outcry, but
If we want to charge people, you're talking about, we're getting in the weeds here, but we're talking about charging people more money on top of all the permits and everything else they have to build on a buildable lot that is clearly uplands.
If they want to cut down a legacy tree, yes. If they want to cut down a 12-inch or 24-inch, whatever that size is going to be, yeah, charge them $500.
yeah, I was thinking more like 5,000 at a minimal. And 3D printing technology is coming out there, so hopefully we can start printing around and building houses around nature, maybe. There's nothing to get in there on that. I'm just saying, more than 90-degree building is coming to the world.
Okay. Are we good on this one?
Are you guys good on that one?
I think we are.
All right.
All right. Next up, tattoos versus permanent makeup. So this is another kind of new trend that staff is seeing as of late. So to provide a little bit of background, the state classifies permanent makeup application the same way and regulate it the same way as they do tattooing, because if you boil it down, it is. Okay? However, a tattoo parlor is much different than a salon that provides permanent makeup. And that's kind of the direction that staff has gone with these requests for permanent makeup that requires local zoning compliance when it comes to these permanent makeups and establishing, where we have you must be so far away from the tattoo parlor, right? And we get a letter saying, hey, is this tattoo parlor okay? But it's not really a tattoo parlor, it's just a salon we're trying to do permanent makeup. So staff has kind of taken a little bit more of a, for lack of a better term, common sense approach to this, where if it's a part of an actual salon and they're providing this as another service on top of their other services, then it's okay. And that distancing requirement is not required to be met. But if it's a tattoo parlor, obviously the intent is there.
And the
So-
distancing requirement is because the other tattoo parlor's there?
Yeah, so
Correct. I
you
mean,
can't be
in
within, I
theory-
believe it's 1,500 feet, wall to wall of another tattoo parlor.
Yeah, so but if it's an accessory in a salon, that's what, you guys are looking for verbiage to try to protect
Correct.
the salon that's already there.
Yeah, we currently
bring
don't,
in
we currently don't break
grandma's
out permanent
tattoo
makeup.
or
and
permanent
tattoo-
makeup.
Yeah, we don't break it out, but the state regulates it and classifies it the same.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have to do it that way, which is why staff has kind of gone down
Has this
that.
been a problem?
Not a problem.
Or, I mean, has it been brought up or pointed out or?
No, it hasn't. It's not an issue, but getting that clarity written down so that when somebody comes in with their letter saying, hey, I need local zoning, signing off saying that my zoning district is okay for this, and we say, oh, well, the state regulates you as a tattoo and there's a tattoo parlor 800 feet down the way, sorry, we can't do that, right? Providing the clarity within the LDC will give staff
So I think,
that
like I said,
ability.
just some type of verbiage that you guys have drafted or will draft
Mm-hmm.
up, saying, defining if it's an accessory at a salon as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to the house of permanent makeup that wants to open up next to the tattoo shop.
Exactly.
Downtown Fort Walton has a permanent makeup establishment within a few feet of a tattoo parlor, I believe.
They have a different zoning code than we do.
No,
So
but I know,
it's
but maybe that's the same language that we're looking for?
Oh, yeah, we can, I mean, yes, we can copy that if you
City
want.
Attorney of
But
Fort
it
Walton
has
Beach, what
been-
does it say?
But I will say, it has happened here, not in the city, to Steve's point, but I actually know there was a salon that wanted to have the permanent makeup, and the only reason that she was able to do it is because she was on Commons, and she was able to go to Okaloosa County and was in their jurisdiction. Had she been a little bit over more and been in Destin, she would not have been able to offer that service. So it is actually something that could easily come up. So we can just do an exemption if everybody's on the same page with that. Move on to the next one.
Just one question.
Go ahead.
If the salon ceases to operate, does the permanent makeup
Yeah,
function cease?
the registration at the state level stays with the person who's providing the service. It doesn't stay with the salon, it doesn't stay with the property, it stays with the person providing the service.
Okay, well, you know what? It's just a less restrictive, it sounds like, than the state law, correct?
Well, the state law doesn't say that it has to be separated, sorry. It doesn't have to be
I got you.
separated.
Okay, that's our zoning.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
just, when it comes to tattooing and permanent makeup, they just say it's a
Okay.
tattoo. A tattoo is a tattoo is a tattoo, whether it's an eyebrow or that.
Yeah, I agree. I think as long as we can couple it with the salon and you guys have the writing to where it's a subsidiary, it's a subservice of the salon, I think I'm fine with it.
Would probably just make a suggestion for it to be very clear that it's only for makeup. Because if that makeup artist leaves, then you have the tattoo artist that could take, no.
No, it would be a service provided by the salon. Yeah, and if they start advertising for tattooing versus permanent makeup, yeah.
Would be nullified.
Well, in there a way that you could put it in there to where you're not gonna have, very unlikely that you're gonna have a tattoo artist doing business right next to somebody, doing hair,
Yeah,
right?
and to be kind of open, most of the individuals that come in for this permanent makeup are legitimate salon owners. So
it's
they're
definitely
people who
popular.
already have a salon, and they're just wanting to add another service to what they provide.
Yeah, and I'm kind of split internally on this, but, you know, as long as it's eyebrows, lips, eyelid, you know, eyelashes, things like that, but I want it well defined because I don't want somebody with a, you know, I love mom permanent makeup on their arm, you know?
That's kind of
or
where I was
a-
going.
On their leg. Well, that's my permanent makeup. So it's got to be narrowly defined. That's half of me. Half of me says, you know, no, just keep it like it is because it doesn't prohibit permanent makeup. We don't prohibit that. What we say is, if you provide that service, you have to be 1,500 feet from somebody, the nearest person, other person who provides that. So, you know, without making y'all go show me where every salon is in town, and there are some that are within 1,500 feet of each other. I got that. So whichever one is the first one that has, because it goes with the artist, not with the salon. So there's not that many permanent, I don't think, makeup artists. You know, give them the thing and somebody else comes in, you say, I'm sorry, you know, as long as that person's over there, but when they leave, you can come in and apply. I mean, how big a problem is this that we're actually trying to solve?
It's not an issue. Staff is
Okay,
just asking for the clarity to be able to differentiate between a tattoo parlor and a beauty salon that's providing permanent makeup as a service.
The tattoo guy can't come in. Do you see what that is?
I'm kind of okay with that. No offense, but
That's a whole different
I'm okay.
discussion, but-
The fewer tattoo parlors we have, you know, Fort Walton Beach, bless their soul, can have 100 of them, and that's up to them. If we can only have one because we have a bunch of permanent makeup people all over the town, I'm trying to figure out what the problem is. Of course, I say that as a guy who doesn't have a tattoo, talking to a guy who doesn't.
We're just seeking clarity in the ordinance, that's it.
I'm sure. All right, everyone good on this one? I think staff is good.
All right.
All right. Next one is mobile vending. We had a workshop on this specific topic. Council at that workshop gave us their preferred two options to kind of bring back and discuss further. Those two options are provided in your staff report. They're both also up here. To kind of break it down, the simplest one right now is option 2, where it's basically anything south of 98 that's non-residential can do mobile vending. Option 1 is a little more nuanced one, and that essentially goes with whether or not a limited service or full service restaurant is permitted or conditional, and where it is permitted and conditional, the mobile vending would be permitted or conditional based on the zoning district. If there's any further clarity that's needed from that, we can discuss that. But those are the two options that council seemed to or recommended were kind of the best at that workshop. And so amongst those two, what seems to be the best?
All right, who likes food trucks? Any of the committee?
Go ahead.
Well, Jim, you're part of the committee. You're over there by them.
I used to live in the venue, and we had food trucks that would come on certain nights, and it was always a treat. It was really nice. So would that prohibit them from being in that area?
I guess depending on the option.
The venue.
Which, I'm sorry, you're gonna have to,
The venue, the apartment
An
complex, the
apartment
venue.
complex?
where is that?
It's over behind Walmart.
Okay, thank you. That is.
All right.
Cheating here. Behind Walmart. That is gonna be
It's the
Gulf
townhomes.
Resort mixed use. So that means In option 1, it would be permitted in Gulf Resort mixed use.
Yes.
And in 2, same in 2.
I'm all for food trucks, and I know we can't permit them and stuff, but if they are part of an event in an area, say Crystal Beach neighborhood or something like, so an HOA wants to bring in a truck for their annual homeowners meeting or out on Holiday Isle or something, and it's not permitted, it can be permitted as part of an event, right?
It can be permitted as either part of a special event or as catering. So
Okay.
long as it's not, that event is not open to the public and people do not come from outside to buy.
Okay. So I'm good with either one, whatever the council wants. I'm, more is better. I'm not, don't like to restrict small business folks generally. So it really doesn't matter to me as long as anybody, as long as they can get it outside of just these tight restrictions.
Why do we have restrictions on?
Oh, we need them.
Because they set up.
I think I would support option 2. Simple is always better.
So, and under any of these circumstances, if someone is, an HOA is looking to do a special event for their annual homeowners meeting, as an example, would that prohibit what's been going on Holiday Isle within another HOA that's inside Holiday Isle? Would either one of these options prevent that?
Okay, so there's 2 things going on here. If it's an event that the food truck is there to cater, that's allowed anywhere, currently, even now, today.
That's right.
Okay? Option 2 would still allow that, but it opens it up. If you look in your packet, the mobile vending map right now, those are the only areas where mobile vending is currently allowed. Green is long-term, 72 hours or longer. The beige, yellow, orange, whatever color you see, is short-term, less than 72 hours, and then you got to go. You can obviously, the other part of this is that the state, we can't require BTRs. We can no longer require a mobile vending license. Okay, so it's completely impossible for staff to track where they're going, how they're going, when they're going, and how long they're there. The only thing that we can tell them is, here's our map, you need property owner permission, and you need to ensure that you have proper parking, and don't leave your trash anywhere. That's pretty much it. Now, if we recognize there are other regulations, you can only have 1 per half acre with a maximum of up to 5 food trucks on any lot. So there's a density. There's some separations and everything. Those are specific regulations that are laid out that are still in the draft LDC. But option 2 would just open it up to anything south of 98 that's not residential. And for however long that we allow it. Long-term, short-term, or we just allow it as it is.
So just for clarification, what I'm speaking to is a specific development on Holiday Isle that has its own HOA, was having food trucks come in every Thursday and advertising it. So you could come onto that property as not a member of that association, and you could purchase. You could even walk off the beach and purchase directly from the vendor. What I'm understanding, for clarification, is that is not currently allowed, nor would it be allowed in the future.
If the property is zoned residentially.
Right. And
If it's zoned any of that south of 98, then it would be permitted.
right, but we're not, all the properties on Holiday Isle are residential, whether they're high density, they're all residential. Well,
There's a few that, for the vast majority of them, yes, they are
right.
residential.
So that is not currently allowed, nor would it be allowed in the future, of an advertisement of ABC, we're going to be there on Thursday, come see us.
Correct.
And make sure you bring your credit card or your cash because we're going to take your money at that
Correct.
establishment. If an HOA is doing it for a annual meeting, then the HOA has made it a catering event, and that is allowed.
Correct.
Okay. I just want to make sure we're not changing the rules.
Nope.
Thank you.
Now I'm confused. There's two instances they could have it in residential. Catered event and a special event.
Yeah.
And the special event could be open to everybody, you know?
Yeah. For the event.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you put a bouncy house there and you say, we're having a kids' day in the park, bring your kids.
So that would have to go through what's called a temporary change of use, which is a process through Compass that community development reviews. And so it would have to get that approval, and it's a very specific, determined amount of time.
And how many of those are allowed a year? Once a week for the whole entire summer season?
There's nothing in the code that prevents that limits the number of special events that you can have, with the exception of there's very specific events that are limited.
Right,
within
so
the code.
to that point, there are special events that are not allowed up to a certain amount.
Correct.
So that should, in my opinion, should probably fall somewhere with this also when we're talking about special events or events at all.
So staff will take a look at that and take that into consideration when developing temporary. Yep.
I am implying there's a loophole. Thank you.
My only thoughts on this would be just for places that we own, or, you know, if there's going to be future facilities, whether it's recreational, you know, the Harbor one, potentially even Joe's Bayou ramp over here where the pickleball could go. I would just like to be able to at least have the option of keeping it open to where we could allow them in these more updated parks that we have coming on the scene in the next 5 years, just to add a little bit more sense of place when it comes to having a park that has a destination to go to and really be allowable to hang out for a while. So not necessarily for the full, I guess it'd still be under the short-term operations at that case, but I don't know if that falls under a specialty thing. But for me, I would love to see food trucks at some of our larger parks in the area. That makes sense, have the parking requirements and everything else.
Yeah, the regulations don't have to be so narrowly focused to just that. If there's other exceptions that want to be made, such as allowing them long-term in all recreational districts within a certain boundary or specific parks.
Yeah.
That's definitely something.
Because while we can't allow them to have, because we're handcuffed with the state with the BTRs, if we were allowing a hookup, we would be then, you know, we could be charging a fee for the hookup and allowing them to operate on our parcel, just like anyone else potentially would be doing.
Yeah, and when it comes to commercial operations on city-owned parks, there's a specific process that has to take place through Parks and Rec.
Okay. Perfect.
Yeah, the only other thing, I like option 2, but I would remove south of Highway 98. I wouldn't limit it to the mayor's point. You know, if it's a commercial district and it's north of 98, because I didn't read it until I read it like the third time and see you're only allowing in option 2 south of 98.
Yes.
I'm okay with them being north of 98 in specific non-residential districts. You know, so if it's a CTS or if it's commercial or it's a recreational or ROI, whatever, I'm sorry, that's not a district, but I'm okay with that.
So another avenue, and I'm correct me if I'm wrong. So these are the planning areas, right? We've got Harbor, Town Center, Gulf Resort, Holiday Isle. Obviously, there's very little in Holiday Isle. Henderson Beach is not going to be allowed, and then Crystal Beach. What I'm garnering here is that if it's a commercial zone in those districts that abut 98, it sounds like you're good with that.
Yes. So in the old public spot. Sorry. Apologize. In the new upcoming Publix lot, that's north of 98. But if they want to have mobile trucks, food vendors there until all their restaurants get built out, or even after their restaurants get built out on those parcels, I'm okay with that. If Target wants to have it, north of 98, so I don't want them in residential unless it's a special event or something like that, but I'm just one. But, I'm okay, more food trucks is better, but I don't want them in the residential, but I wouldn't keep them just south of 98. I guess that's what
Yeah,
I'm saying.
I like that. Any other inputs?
I'd like to make one last statement. I'm going to have to disagree with you, Mayor.
It's okay.
I do not support commercial activity in any public parks of any sort. If there's a place where it can be off of the park property, like I'm thinking of like the Joe's Bayou where it's across the street, and I'm just, no commercial activity in public parks, sorry. That just opens a whole can of worms for other type of vendors that may want to start taking over and coming and lobbying the city for other things that I'm just not open to, sorry.
No, fair enough.
And I'll agree with Marcy Bell on this one. My neighbor had a paddleboard business. City shut him down for taking the paddleboard and launching from the commercial park. So if you open up that, how do you restrict the other? So I agree with Patty.
My only thought, and again, it's still potentially Pandora's box, but would be to have a designated parking spot that would allow them to have those hookups, and it would be that location, that spot being the hookup for mobile vending. So you're almost charging to have them hooked up to your source right there, and that's giving them the one and only designation. Again, not a lawyer, so that potentially still opens us up for other commercial activity for being hypocrites, but that was my only thought, was a single location that has the hookups would potentially lock us into a specific use, but I don't know if that's legal.
Mr. Mayor, I love your idea and I support it 100%.
Ouch.
I've got a question. My fear with that would be that, it would be it would be a hot commodity to be there 4th of July weekend or 4th of July week, I think, however, it would be, I've talked to a lot of folks who would like to use Joe's Bayou for educational purposes and stuff like that. Would it be possible to do that between a certain date where it's not, you're not impeding traffic and everything else, and having competition for that spot during big weekends? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I know, we have a covenant, I don't know the vocab here, where a certain percent of the fees that we collect through the Parks and Rec, I think it's 20%, we're supposed to try to offset 20% of the expenses through fees and everything. And instead of charging people to launch their boat, we would have this as an option to garner money through Parks and Recreation to try to meet that percentage goal of profits.
Would you charge the food vendors a percentage?
Yeah, I would say, I know, talking to some of the ones that are in Fort Walton and even in Shalimar, on those pretty decent corridors, they were saying, if you had a hookup for power and water, you'd be charging $1,500 a month, maybe a couple $100 for a day or a weekend, kind of exclusive rights to that one location. So, not necessarily trying to do it for the money, more having access and having more things to do at the park and trying to encourage more people to go to the green space. But there's also a win of trying to raise money through the Parks and Rec without charging fees on our residents. So that was just the win-win that I was coming from.
Can I ask one question to Kim before we leave this? So Kim, if we designated one spot in a park, how do you pick that person that gets to use that? Doesn't that become the slot that we're dealing with Crab Island right now, where we want one vendor versus multiple vendors? And if we only have one position, how do we represent or defend that when if there's multiple food trucks?
Yeah, that's an issue, but one thing that the city has as a weakness in the code, and Lance was just, mentioning it to me over here as well and was about to jump in, but we do not have we don't have a special event permitting process, and really, we probably should, and that's something that probably needs to be in the code like other cities have. But one way to do it is, we could have special events in parks be allowed so that we don't open up the door necessarily to commercial use, but on occasion, they can get a permit, for some amount of time to, if it's 4th of July, to Councilmember King's point, or other things. That's one option. I think if the council tells us what policy they want to put in place, staff and I can brainstorm as to how to make it happen. So, let us know what you want to do and we'll figure out a way to give you some legal options to do it.
Would a lottery be legal?
There's lots of statutes on lotteries. Maybe, depends on how we set it up. But like I said, if you guys tell us how you want it, we will figure out some options and come back with them.
Could we do permanent makeup there?
Once again, there's always a way.
The only point I would make is I'm sure the brick and mortar food service people won't appreciate being in competition with the city of Destin. Myself, I'm already working harder than I want to, so I don't care. I know some of them will.
Mr. Destin, I believe you'd have a food truck. I believe you'd make one.
I thought we did have a special event permit process because I've known people that have gotten them, and now I'm a little confused. Maybe it's not as robust as it should be or something, but do we not have?
It's not a special event permit, and if it's on private property, it's considered a temporary change of use.
Okay.
So, for example, the Palms here, they do the auto show, the car show every so often.
Yep.
They consistently come through with a temporary change of use.
Okay.
So that's on private property. When it comes to public recreational property, the temporary change of use doesn't apply because
There is a process for that.
Yeah.
When it's on, like at Morgan Sports Center, we have a process for a special event there, but not on private property put on by private individuals.
Okay. I just want to make sure. B, and you bring up Morgan's, there's a couple of places where I could see us doing that, the ball fields, but then that would conflict or compete with, the vendors that we've already got there at, Dalton Threadgill and at Morgan Sports Center. So, but I mean, it would provide a little more diversity for offerings there. I'm not so sure about in the parks. The only other event that I can think of would be like the cardboard boat race. If somebody wanted to go down there during that, when you got all the middle schoolers there, we already have them on the harbor, so we don't need to do that.
Just a
at
special
our
event.
park there. So I'm not sure I would do a lottery or a permanent anywhere in the city, to be honest with you.
Okay, I think staff's good on that one. Okay, last one. Primary building / structure separation. So right now, there's a little easily glossed over section in the LDC that requires a 10-foot separation between primary buildings and or structures, okay? What is intended for primary buildings or structures is the primary use. And you can have a primary use that has multiple structures, buildings on there. And there's a separation minimum of 10 feet, okay? This isn't an uncommon thing in land regulations to have this separation, and it was it came out kind of pre-fire separation within building codes. If you look at building codes now, there's a fire separation that you're not required to do any sort of fire rating if you're outside of 10 feet. That's also kind of the general reason why there's a minimum of 5-foot separation on side yards. So you get a full 10 feet, so you don't get that within that 10-foot fire separation need. The way staff views it now is there is fire rating requirements in the building code. We have that industry protecting it or setting those standards. Do we really need to have that now consistently all throughout the entire city? Do we need to maintain 10 feet building separation from primary uses on all properties across the entire city? In some instances, there's a need to maintain that character-defining neighborhood. Residential districts generally come to mind, the village planning area come to mind, right? Maintaining that separation, keeping that wide open space look, that character-defining look, as spoken about. But is it needed throughout the city? And that's staff's question here tonight, is do we need to maintain that throughout? If not, where should we maintain it?
You got any feedback from the fire department on that, since it is partially an issue there? Are you concerned? Have you got any feedback from the fire department, since that is kind of tied in with their mission?
We have not reached out to the fire department or the fire district specifically. However, it would be reviewed. Any building plan or anything would be reviewed by the fire district.
Yeah, and I get that part. I just hate to send them something to review that they absolutely think is a horrible idea to begin with. So I would reach out to them and see what they say. I don't understand the real rationale behind it, other than the fire issue. And correct me if I'm wrong, but if we do a PUD, we don't have to follow that, do we?
We'll just defer back to the fire department. Yeah. The biggest issue for us here is that we're having two standards. They may change at the fire department, and we're still stuck with what we got. So they got more control on these because it's life safety issues that are involved. And so we would like to defer back to them.
Yeah.
Unless it's clearly a character defining in particularly that zoning districts where character defining issues are prevalent.
Good.
Yeah.
I hate to make it more difficult than it is. Is there any option to make it a conditional use of that standard? If there's a good reason to say there's a heritage tree, and if we go 5 feet, we can save the tree and everyone's happy, versus, is there a way to make it more of if-then with that range? Because to your point, I don't mind.
Development standards can be created. But you're getting into a lot of nuances. And,
yeah, I'd hate to give you this.
I mean, when you boil it down, all land development codes and land use regulations are fairly arbitrary to begin with, in a sense. But they're established by a community, and it's what they want, right? It's not like a building code where there's an industry and everyone follows that one. Each community sets those rules because this is the community. You live here. These are the rules that you're going to live by. If you don't want that, but that community over there allows it, then you can do that there, but not here, right? So those standards can absolutely be developed. But again, looking to what do we develop them off of?
And can we
Forest
defend?
builder?
Yes. Can we defend them?
Right.
I have a question that's a little bit outside the box, and it may not pertain to this because you're using the term primary structure, but we have somebody that's looking at an RV park potentially in the future, and those are structures that are going to move in and out. And I've been at RV parks where they park back to back, and you utilize those areas. Would this apply to those types of structures? I mean, they're the primary use while they're inside that RV park, and if you create that distance, it eliminates the potential of a fire outbreak. I'm just trying to understand the full scope to wrap my hand around it.
So one, this generally only applies to things that require a permit, but I'm being tapped, so let me take a look at this real
I
quick.
think for the RV park, they have their own standards.
The definition of a structure is anything constructed or erected with a fixed location on the ground or attached to something having a fixed location on the ground.
Because they're not permanent structures.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of understood they weren't permanent, but that's why I wanted to make sure that they didn't apply, even in a temporary status, because the slabs themselves, the slab on grade or the pads they put there are permanent. But now that I understand, if they're not attached to those pads, they don't become part of that permanent.
Yeah, but the pads themselves have separation, required separate.
They're going to be required to have the 10-foot separation.
I don't know specifically 10 foot, but there may be, somewhere in our code, there's likely some sort of separation required. But as of right now, permanent structure would be required at least 10 foot.
I appreciate that. And I just want to understand, so when this future issue or question comes to the council, I have at least some educated guess of what I need to be looking at.
All right, any other comments?
Yeah, wouldn't it be easier just to say you got to be 10 feet across the entire city rather than saying in specific zoning districts, you have a different setback or you have a different?
Currently, that's what the code says, that across the city, primary structures are required to be 10 foot. And as stated earlier, the intent behind that was generally predated the fire code, fire ratings and all of that. And so there isn't really a necessity for that now. And so if there's areas in the city that we want to maintain that characteristic look, such as in the residential districts or in specifically the northern green blob there, the village planning area, that's an easy regulation for staff to take a look at, and then everywhere else it just falls in line with the Florida Building Code and fire codes.
Okay, as long as it's easy to right.
Yeah, either way is
I
easy.
Thought it'd be easier to just say it's 10 feet across the entire city.
It is, but it's also very, it hinders development as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah. So I'm kind of with Mr. Destin on this. Go ask the fire department first. But my one question is, what's the difference between a primary and an accessory?
Would you like me to answer this?
Yeah.
I just had this battle today.
We got some knowledgeable committee members.
So if you got a neighborhood that's building, let's say you got an empty lot in a neighborhood, right? And you have an owner come in and say, well, I want to build an accessory structure. Well, you've got to have the primary structure because an accessory is an accessory. So that's the difference. There's a primary, and to have an accessory, you got to have the primary. Does that make sense?
I understand that.
But what-
So here's where I'm headed. Here's where I'm headed with that. A carriage house, which is really kind of what we're talking about here, is a carriage house which has bathroom, kitchen, living, dining room, usually above a 2-car parking garage or whatever. Is that a primary or an accessory?
It's an accessory.
So that would be an accessory dwelling unit. And those that would only be allowed so many square footage, up to a certain amount of square footage based on what's the primary residence.
Right.
So the carriage house, as you're describing it, would be an accessory.
So why would we allow 2 primaries on the same lot without making them subdivide the lot?
It's mixed-use zoning districts, a duplex.
Okay, a duplex I understand, but a duplex doesn't have to be separated by 10 feet. Common
Yeah.
wall.
Yeah. Well, I'm just giving you examples.
I'm leading you down this little rabbit hole
Yeah.
because that's what I want you to think about.
Yeah.
I don't, you want to make it 10 feet, you want to make it 5 feet, you want to make it 15 feet. As long as the fire department says okay, I don't
And
care.
that's kind of where
But
we're.
what I'm looking at is the nature of, because some of these lots back up on the bay up there are huge. Huge. You could put 3 primaries, 4 primaries, and you could separate them by 50 feet each, and there would still be space on them. I'm thinking Sandy's lot up there. So I'm just trying to figure out why we would allow 2 houses on an unsubdivided lot, not a duplex, not a triplex or a fourplex or anything like that.
Because there's density maximums as well that also limit. And we wouldn't, so a 1,200 square foot accessory dwelling is massive. I mean, I didn't live in a 12,000 or a 2,000 square foot home with my wife until I moved here.
Yeah.
So,
That
I mean,
doesn't
that's big. I mean, with 4 people, 1,200's doable, right? So, I mean, that's pretty big. And in many communities, that would be a primary structure. But in here, that would be considered, as long as it doesn't exceed 1,200 and there's another home on it, it would be considered accessory. So would we allow a 1,300 square foot home with a 2,000 square foot, with another 2,000 square foot home on there, no. It would be up to 1,200 square feet.
Unless it's a mother-in-law suite, which I think is specifically allowed.
Yeah.
Well, I think some of
Mother-
those two, the zoning is
Yeah.
different.
They're,
So it's not even a residential lot, really. They found the loophole.
Is a dock an accessory or a primary?
docks have their own. Please, let's not go here tonight.
All right, but with that, I mean, I was going to bring this up, and we're under ADUs right now, so I figured better time now than ever with that. So is everyone with the fire, everyone have their, we're going to wait for the fire marshal? That's kind of where we're,
Staff will reach out to the fire district to get some input from them.
okay, I want to make sure we got that before I veer a little bit off on the same topic. For now, talking about the ADUs and having them a permittable use, not counting towards density in the village, in the residential district. I mean, for me, that's something that I think we can do without opening another Pandora's box and allowing workforce housing and some of these additional things. And I think we can put caveats like you can only rent one of the dwelling units, which basically means that the owner is living next door. But I'm very much for having additional dwelling units in the residential districts if we can put restrictive caps to make sure that it's about long-term residential, it's about workforce housing, and potentially just wealth generation for the local residents that are here. So, you know, just wanted to open that up right now. You're getting a weird look. But yeah, the accessory.
Well, and the state has preempted our ability to do that with the allowance of VRBO and essentially other types of uses.
So I'm saying, you know, for me, as an example, I have 2 garages, and I live in West Destin in the village there in the green area. I'm on a 1/4 acre. Most of the lots are 1/4 acre. The equation that comes out through the density puts me at 1.33. So I'm not allowed to have an additional dwelling unit, even though it's attached to the house, regardless of the common wall or anything. I'm trying to open that up because there's a lot of second garages on my street specifically and in the neighborhood to where I see that we're always talking about workforce housing, and you know, with the prices of insurance and everything else going up, I can see this is a great way to allow locals to generate wealth while having a single tenant next door, because I would hate to have this as a 2 rental, you know, unit, long or short. But I just wanted to get people's thoughts and if there's any ways to contain it, to make sure that we don't have any unintended consequences while opening up the possibility to have additional dwelling units. So I don't know where people's thoughts are on that, but this is the first LPA meeting and this is under zoning, so this is kind of the first level of this thought.
So I have a thought on this. Once again, Aspen, Colorado, sorry. They are required when they build or rebuild, they have to have a separate unit that's an affordable housing unit, workforce housing unit. Now, most of the time, that unit probably goes to the caretaker for the property because they're not there all the time. And then that person has a spouse who has a job outside in the community. That's how that kind of works. Those are the people that I know that did it. But I know that in their particular workforce affordable housing program that they require, I don't know if it's Aspen alone or also Pitkin County, the county that Aspen's in, but there is a requirement, or had been a requirement, I'm sure it's still there, that if you were to build a unit why have I lost my train of thought? When you tear it down and rebuild it, redevelop it, you have to build a unit that is an affordable, and it has to be a unit that's like a 1 or 2 bedroom unit. I mean, it's a livable space. I think to your point.
Yeah, and I don't think I would want it to be a requirement, but I would like it to be a permittable use to allow that to happen. But, you know, I know there's pros and cons, so I'd love to hear them.
Huge con, short-term rentals. What prevents them from turning them into short-term?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would stay long-term. Right now, that's 6 months in a day. And it would be to where you would only be allowed to rent out one of the units, whether it's your primary or the additional dwelling unit. You're only allowed to rent out one. I think long-term, you still need to pull a permit. You still get your BTR. So either way, we'd have a way of documenting which one you're doing. If the school has bought and we win the award, there's 130-something less senior living facility beds that are going to be in Destin. So, this is also a way to hopefully promote the aging in place, where someone who's living in the primary could switch over to the carriage house or whatever you want to call it and rent out the bigger house. But, I think just allowing only one rental unit per location helps. And then you have an owner on site. So, you're not dealing, you would have an owner on site to deal with, I guess, levels of noise and everything else of nuisancy. But for me, it's trying to make sure we don't go down to the short-term rental path, but still give it options for homeowners to, generate income and help offset workforce housing needs in the community.
So a lot of the zoning districts north of 98 have a pre-2011 prohibition on short-term rentals. And that is why there's not a lot of short-term rentals north of 98. There's a pocket or two where they're allowed. If you open up that door, I just have to warn the council that you may arguably lose that grandfathering, because the statute provides that when you have a code in place that's after 2011, so now, you can no longer prohibit them. So I think to Councilmember Giles' point, I just want to point that out because that issue has been contentious up here. So that is a policy decision for council to decide if they want to go down that path.
I would hate to lose the grandfather, because I think out of everything, the preservation is
we could
most
fight it out in
important.
court and see if we win, but
No, that's my, I guess that's the main issue. I don't think it's well worth opening it up, but, I'm just trying to find solutions to the workforce housing.
Yeah, and I understand your desire to do so, but we also would be fundamentally perhaps changing the nature of single-family dwelling districts. I don't know, but we need to come up with some kind of a solution.
All right, anyone else got comments on that? It's kind of a sidebar. All right, seeing none. You
Well,
guys-
I'm sorry, my little 2 cents worth, I can't think of any way to destroy a neighborhood than to allow STRs. They
Yeah, no, I would
absolutely
hate to have
destroy
STRs.
communities.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, no, I'm definitely against the growth of STRs in the northern area. All right, staff, any final thoughts, thumbs up?
Yeah, I got a couple of slides for you. We really appreciate everyone's thoughts and time and consideration in this. It's greatly going to help us get through the rest of Article 4 and provide what we hope to be a product that you all will look at and not have too many qualms with. All right, so next steps to Article 4, now that we're complete with this workshop. The final draft article was posted to the website, like I stated earlier, on September 12th. We're having tonight the joint workshop between City Council and LPA. So the next one would be an initial review with the LPA with what staff is shooting for on October 5th, which is a fairly quick turnaround because that's not this Thursday, but next Thursday. And then the first public hearing, because we promised the public that we would not hold a public hearing within 30 days of posting the draft to the website. So that makes the next available LPA hearing for a public hearing would be October 19th. For hopefully what would be a recommendation to City Council. And then City Council's first public hearing on Article 4, tentatively set for November 6th. And then if a second one is needed, that would be the December 4th meeting, all if needed. And all of these are December 11? Correct. Okay, my apologies.
December 11th.
Yep, December 11th. Again, all of these are tentative because it could shift right if we don't meet that October 5th deadline. Then the LPA won't have their first look at it, initial look at it. But we could still hold a public hearing on October 19th. But the LPA may recommend a second hearing, or City Council may recommend just to have a third or however many more. So again, they're all tentative, but that's kind of the general direction that staff is heading at this moment, with the change that it's December 11th, not December 4th for the second one.
So are we on track to having all the articles by, I know the 3TP, we gave them one more year extension. Are we still kind of on the same train?
That's going to be my next slide, but I think Ray's got something. Okay, all right. So what's coming down? Currently, staff has Article 5 in with review right now. We are developing that and getting it ready for an initial review and then posting to the website as well. That is our subdivision regulations. So general thought behind that is Article 7, Section 8 has to do with subdivision regulations. Subdivisions are a very important aspect of any land development code and deserves its proper location of its own article. So that's being pulled out along with several other subdivision regulations that's kind of trickled here and there throughout the LDC. And then after that, what's in with 3TP right now in development is Article 6, which is Conservation, Resource Protection, and Sustainability. So they're developing that, and they should have that to us in the next few weeks, possibly, depending on how fast they can pump that out, but more than likely towards the end of the year. And then we have 4 articles. We don't know which order they're going to be in, hence the Article X, but that would be the development impact mitigation or impact fees. That's essentially, for the most part, not complete, but that's going in line with the mobility plan because the mobility plan also has that new impact fee study. So once that's kind of done, that article's for the most part complete. And then the sign regulations, we'll do that, and then a enforcement article that will help provide clarity on how things are enforced, and then an update on the glossary / definitions, and then all while that's being worked on, staff is developing the City of Destin Design Manual, and that's kind of the bigger lift of what is left in this list here. So that's what's coming down the pike over the next several months. Yeah, we hope to get this all wrapped up sooner rather than later, because I know everyone is anxious to get this done. So with that, questions?
Seeing none? All right. I'll close the meeting.